Hey everyone, welcome back to Crypto Cash. Thank you so much for joining me here. I hope you're having a fantastic day. We're taking a quick look at our crypto market overview, but more specifically ETF net inflow. We're going to take a peek at open interest, of course, fear and greed index, and of course, altcoin season index. This is extremely important right now. You need to know how these altcoins are performing. Honestly, not too bad, all things considered. The main thing we're going to focus on here is XRP's triangle pattern here, getting a breakdown, basically that $3.10 to $3 support range getting tested. We're going to peek over at Solana 2 with its ascending trend, and SUI cup and handle pattern, and last but not least would be Ethereum and its nice little triangle pattern here too. So honestly, still a lot of strength in altcoins, so we're going to discuss that. But the first thing we're going to look at is Bitcoin. And before you roll your eyes and get tired of watching Bitcoin analysis, I get it, but it's super important to understand the foundations here. So we're going to talk on that and kind of go from there as the baseline. Initially though, let's discuss this quickly just to kind of get the market overview out of the way so you know the overall sentiment here. First things first, we're looking pretty good with ETF net inflows. So we saw an outflow on Sunday and again on Tuesday, but now on Wednesday, effectively 2 days ago, this is a lag, keep that in mind, we see a positive inflow for Bitcoin. So this is a good sign showing sustainability or potential for that. Every time we've seen the ETF selling off, or basically a negative ETF outflow, the price of Bitcoin goes down, which we just saw happen today. It's kind of like a foreshadow. A problem is you can't see it right away, but it is very indicative. We saw a power of 3 trade setup back in June 30th. That was roughly 3.5 weeks ago, and that happened last. I'll discuss that in the charts here in a minute. Fear and greed index is at 66, is actually good. It's common for the price action for Bitcoin to go kind of sideways in a range while this cools down. So we want this number to keep going down as Bitcoin stays the same. That's the goal. If that happens, then we are more likely to see the price action shoot higher up at some point, kind of like a Bollinger Band compression. When we look at 42 here on the altcoin season index, we can see here we're basically the same as we were yesterday, and last week still up above. In other words, simple way to understand is altcoins is just a representation of how well altcoins are doing versus Bitcoin. Even though our market dominance is dropping, we're seeing 1.48 trillion down from 1.6. There's a solid chance that we start to bottom out here soon. And the fact that alts are just kind of maintaining a good range, and they're doing fairly well, all things considered. So I don't think it should be a case in point where we just start shorting everything. I think we maybe want to consider taking some longs, and I'll explain more so in that regard here shortly. Let's start with Bitcoin on the back end here first and kind of go from there. I do already have a Bitcoin analysis out, so if you watch that, you can maybe skip forward a little bit, but I promise you it's important to understand where this is at. Because when we look at the open interest, here, let's go ahead and refresh this here. We can see there's a lot of resistance at 117, 118, and we can round up and just say 119 too. There's like 3 key levels there above us. That's where exit liquidity is going to occur if the price comes up, and that's going to be a case in point where we see the price action retrace and pull back if it hits those ranges. So I believe our point of control is at 118. We'll double check that, but if so, then that's going to be a solid resistance for us here. Taking a look here, we can see open interest here. Correction, no, this is actually liquidation. We can see the liquidation delta is about pretty solid amount there. It's about a half a billion there for Bitcoin. We're right here at this turning point though. We got more shorts than longs, and look at this here, liquidation. I need to refresh this here just to double check. We can see there's a solid amount of liquidation down as low as 114.5 to 113. So just say 113 to 115 is that area there. That should get hit next here. When we look at the net longs versus net shorts, we can see longs are super underwater at 118.7. If you're a long at 118.7, I'm sorry to hear that. I've been talking about the price action pulling back for Bitcoin for quite some time. And once again, just to clarify, 36% in 2 weeks. I know it's not like the greatest time frame turnaround there, but we shorted Bitcoin because there was a lot of reasons. I've been explaining that for a while now. Anyways, the whole point we mentioned this is yesterday and the day before, I was very specific in letting you know that it's important to short the 120 range and consider longing 116 until that range breaks. We've broken that range. Now we have to recalibrate. Okay. Either way, we look here. We see 118.7 as the significant area of longs. There's also some late longs at 115.5. Let's see if we can refresh this a little bit, make sure we can kind of see that hasn't really changed too much. Shorts are in profit at 118.2, and also 117.3. Last but not least, we see the liquidation, basically long and short delta effectively here at about 118.7. That's the average price for longs and shorts. So when we take a look here at the daily time frame, we want to recognize that we lost our ascending trend. While it hasn't fully closed yet, it's safe to presume we're probably going to be closing below 118 today. Probably also 116. We close below 116 and we can't reclaim that. I think we're going to be stuck in a range between 112 and 116. The reason why I feel 112 is relevant is if we look at smaller time frames, that's a previous resistance for us. We spent a lot of time rejecting out at 112, so it seems sensible for that to be retested, plus this massive fair value gap between 112 and 116. Okay, it's approximate more like 115, but it's right there. You can see that pretty clear. Everything else is diverging. There's nothing much else here really letting us know. We had early indications yesterday and the day before, so I'm glad, and congrats to those who watch my videos, and you're very welcome, of course. I do this for you. This is just an amazing part of my life, and you're part of that. So thank you again so much for the wonderful feedback I've been receiving here lately. But we can see we're below the RSI, SMA. RSI is running down, moving the money flow index is below the RSI. These are all disadvantageous signs. Very last thing to show you on Bitcoin here before we move on is this previous high. So just to kind of clarify, so you are familiar. We got a previous high here. That was May 23rd. We retested here on the 9th of July and effectively broke out without looking back. That's what created these fair value gaps because the price moved too fast. So a lot of this value here that the money makers, market makers rather, they make money too. They are the ones that are trying to push the price to that level so they can trap a lot of late shorts and effectively collect on that profit because they have a lot of profit between now and then. That's essentially what that tells us. So that's where Bitcoin's at. Let's look at Ethereum next and kind of go from there. We'll go ahead and start with the back-end liquidation data first and see where we're at, because Ethereum is one of the strongest coins right now as far as it's concerned. We have a short position open at 3,700. It never seems to get into profit for very long. I'm probably just going to consider closing it because it's been we've had that trade open for a little while as well. Having said that, though, when we look at open interest, we can see there are some heavy concentrations at 3560, 3650 previously, and 3730. So those are three areas of support and resistance depending on what side we're on. We're kind of in the middle of that range, so our average true range is, you could say or argue, is 3650. It's kind of the average. We look here at the liquidation short delta. This is another thing kind of that's interesting. The price doesn't pull back, but we got a ton of people shorting this coin. It kind of just reinforces how strong it is, but we're at about 10 billion in short liquidation delta, basically telling us that we need at least 10 billion in new inflow here effectively to be able to offset that. So truth is it's an uphill battle. So it's an interesting thing when we have a conflicting factors there, right? We got liquidation delta telling us it's going to go down. Everyone believes it's going to go down, but yet tons of support below the price. We have money flowing in. To me personally, when I see this ETF net inflow, this leads me to believe that ETH is here to stay. We actually have just a little bit more Ethereum than Bitcoin for an ETF net inflow. Granted, that's a lag, but it's still relevant to note that from an ETF perspective, Ethereum is outperforming Bitcoin. All right, so take a look here at the daily time frame, just to recognize quickly. We are above all moving averages. We have our overextension line here at about 3,400, so that could be a pivot point for us. But the key takeaway here is that it seems to make sense the price to pull back, and it should pull back, especially if Bitcoin continues to retrace. But I wouldn't be surprised if this coin just continues higher here and we pivot and bounce. When we look at the 4-hour time frame, there's no significant divergence here. Most of the coins are obviously below 50 in the RSI. They've shifted their momentum. Their stochastics are maxing out. ETH is just kind of chilling. It's hanging out right here in the center line. It looks like it's ready to leg up again. So me personally, I would not bet against this coin. I'm probably just going to close our short position in a small amount of profit and just call it a day. We're averaging at 3,700. And I don't really love the idea of holding a long position open with this coin, yet alone a short. So I don't really like the idea of either, because when coins compress like this, it's too volatile for me, and I don't really like to trade coins that are like this. So you're statistically more favorable to find benefit going up than down with this coin, which is weird to say in the market right now, just based on how well it's performing versus Bitcoin. Just keep in mind, Bitcoin does run to 112, 113. We'll probably see a wick down to this 3,500, maybe even 3,400 if you get lucky. But ETH looks pretty sustainable at this point, just based on the larger perspective. Moving on to Solana. Let's go ahead and take a quick look here. We are testing our ascending trend, and on the back end, let's see where we're at. Looking at Solana, if I recall correctly, we had a lot of open interest above us, which we do. 185 is that area that was supposed to work as a support level, but didn't. And we can see 190 as well. So even though we have a lot of support at 177 with more confluence, I believe there's fib levels there and previous highs working as new lows, we have resistance above us too. So it would be foolhardy to presume Solana is going to just shoot straight back up from here. It should and could continue to go higher, but once more, 185 is that local resistance. Short liquidation delta is at 3 billion. That's super high, basically implying you don't want to take a long either. It's just foolhardy and not very smart. Same thing here as well, 175 to 172. There's incentive for the price to come down a little bit lower before the price goes higher. Once more, those are late longs jumping in at 175. So just keep that in mind. They probably jumped in at 177, 178, and their liquidation is 175. That implies there's a lot of leverage, specifically high leverage there. Okay, so all the more reason why whales are just like, doop, yes please, we'll go ahead and sweep those little idiots. So don't be an idiot is the key takeaway here. Now this is a support range, so I don't blame you or fault you for trying to get in here. This is an area that I've been honestly interested in trying to get in. But with us testing this ascending trend line, having lost our moving averages on the 4-hour, and then the daily, if I recall, was showing significant divergence, which it still is, there's no real reason to jump right in here. There's not like a ton of support. Bitcoin continues to run. Seems like there's a lot of profit being taken today. Then I think Solana will too. If Solana does pull back to a worst case scenario, it would be this area here, the previous high, 168. That's the area that I would say is probably more advantageous to consider. I know it seems crazy to keep, kind of thinking, we'll just say 170, to keep, recalibrating. But when the market moves and the market adjusts like this, you don't just FOMO in because it's the first dip you see. Now that Bitcoin's lost its key level support, it's 116,000, it seems pretty indicative we're going to go lower. Okay, and altcoins are not performing very well to them versus that rather. And if you see here, Bitcoin dominance is technically kind of pulling back. So that's, truth be told, a decent sign for altcoins, but I still don't love it. It still feels kind of false to me. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to SUI, kind of see what's going on here. We're on the bottom edge of this area here, and this is the coin that kind of reinforces the word confluence. I've mentioned this previously because some folks are like, I'm just going to buy because it's a 0.786 fib level, and some Elliott wave theorist told me to buy here. That is so stupid. I cannot believe how ridiculous people are that actually believe that. It's it's basically one of those things where, like it's a placebo effect, like you take something thinking it's going to do something for you and it doesn't do anything at all. That's kind of what it is. And no discredit to anybody who teaches that. I'm sure they're pretty amazing. But the key takeaway is if you get 15 different scenarios for possible considerations for a bounce or a pivot or a continuation, you're always going to be right. It is ridiculous. So take it from me. When you look for confluence, it's important. And the confluence tells us that there's a lot of things contributing in one area. So if we take a look here, the support range that I've highlighted, 360 to 343 as a rough estimate, that's proven to be a good solid resistance range in the past. Therefore, should work as a new support. It's also an area of confluence here, basically with key fib levels, that 0.65 fib level, that's a golden pocket. And then we also have some moving averages hanging out there on both time frames. So it's kind of an area in which I would say should have some support. Now, if we look at the 4-hour time frame, we've lost some pretty important moving averages here. We're now essentially establishing lower highs and lower lows. While flag patterns are beneficial, they do typically break out. This still doesn't feel right. Let me go ahead and take a look at the back end and just confirm. This is usually what kind of seals the deal for me is when I look at open interest. And we can see massive amount of open interest above the price. There's a little bit in the 370, 380 range. Basically, the key takeaway here is that it's all above the price right now. So we want that to be below us. That's exit liquidity. If the price comes up to that level, people are going to sell. They're trying to get out of their upside down positions. We also see 500 million short liquidation delta. That's pretty high. Furthermore, when we look at liquidation itself, there's still a pocket between 350 to 340. I would not be surprised if market makers push the price to that level and then quickly reverse it on us, right? So I would much rather wait for an opportunity down there than I would take a long right now. It's just kind of how it feels. But once more, you don't really trade based on feeling, right? I mean, even though I have a pretty good feel for the market after 20 plus years in the industry, I can tell you that we don't truly know what's going to happen next. No one really does. But in all reality, this support range of 350 to 360 should provide ample support, which it has so far already. If we see one more leg down, I might consider a long on the 350s. So I have changed my narrative from 360 as a consideration for entry to 350. But once more, I wasn't expecting Bitcoin to break its 116K range. Truth be told, it hasn't closed below that yet. We don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but that's it's still a little too early, personally, for me to say that. All right, so let's quickly look at XRP here. XRP is on the struggle bus, not looking so phenomenal. We'll come back to the charts here in a minute. Let's go ahead and look at the back-end liquidation data, and we can see open interest starting to get a pretty heavy concentration at $3. So I would say from a macro perspective that $3 is going to be a strong support for XRP. Psychological support for one, but if I recall correctly from before, there's a lot of confluence in that area. We'll double check that's the case. But as we see open interest starting to pile up here, that increases the odds of sustainability in that range. So I think people are getting heavy in the $3 range for XRP, and it does seem sensible there. Now, liquidation short delta is super high. Generally speaking, you don't want to trade along against that, but this one does feel a little different with a solid foundational base there, and that there is very little liquidation left to the downside. So that really just implies there's only up from here in a lot of ways. Now, is that a guarantee? Definitely not. Let's take a look here. First of all, previous high, 299 right there, spent some time there before the price broke out. So we can presume if the price comes down again, that's going to be a good solid support, okay? Now, when we look at the daily time frame, we can recognize we are 3 days into this divergence. When we look at stochastic, we can see everything's pulling back. There's nothing really good here. The money flow index is remaining above the RSI though. This is the one thing, it's kind of like a shining star. Money flow index tells us a lot, and it tells us that there's more money flowing in than out in this coin in the last 14 trading days. So even though it's pulling back, yes, money's pulling away, but the average of the last 14 days is still higher than the RSI, and that's proven to be a pretty good sign. So my speculation is that the $3 range does hold, but we are starting to see a divergence here. There's no doubt that there are some early signs here that continuation lower is likely. So just bear that in mind, all right? So if you do take it long right now, it is a considered risk. But if somehow Bitcoin can pivot and bounce off its current range, then we're going to probably be in good shape to see XRP recover. Again, that's just based on that local range. There's also a 0.382 fib level there. So once more, some added confluence. So 4-hour time frame, truthfully, does not look great. There's no doubt about it here. This is not an optimal situation to consider a long. So the best thing you can do for yourself is kind of wait on the sidelines and hang out and just make sure and ensure that you see this level, this range kind of hold. But honestly, the best trade right now is no trade, unless you're shorting. And I don't really love the idea of shorting a lot of altcoins right now. So that's just me. What are your thoughts? I know I play a little conservative sometimes, but hey, we make plenty of extra change in our community because of it, right? Once more, patience is super important foundational value of being a good trader. So I hope you can learn something today, or had learned something rather. Thank you again so much for being an amazing part of my life. Make sure you check us out over at BitUnix, link down below. Take advantage of the only offer this year for crypto cash. Links down below for that as well. I mention that because I get a lot of questions on it, and make sure, folks, when you are registering, you're actually using the link down below. So in other words, when you click on Join Premium and you choose your plan, you put in your coupon code right here where it says have a coupon. People miss that, and it's pretty obvious to me that it's right there. You put in summer sale and you're good to go. Anyways, future reference. Thanks again so much either way. We'll look forward to seeing the next one, and feel free to reach out if you want. Don't be a stranger. All my contact information is down below. Have a good rest of your day. We'll see you in the next one. Take care.